It's almost as though they created the Red Album, but with all of the experience that they've had right up until Gold and Grey. What's up guys, welcome back and hello if you are new. I hope all of you are having a fantastic week so far. So it's hard to believe that Baroness have been going for 20 years and were founded in 2003, and yet every single album they've released has been nothing short of pretty much a masterpiece. Now foregoing their beloved colour wheel, which was very much kind of a sort of bedrock in Baroness's identity, the band welcome in a new age on the 6th album, Stone. If you're not familiar with Baroness, they're kind of a combination of, I would say, stoner, post-rock, progressive and psychedelic. For the band kind of focused their albums on specific colours. So you had the red album, the blue record, yellow and green, which was the first double album, purple, which was right after their incredibly bad bus crash, which, as you can imagine, I thought was so clever, left the band bruised, so obviously purple, and then Gold and Grey, which was the second double album, and that kind of like finished off the overall colour feeling. This is the first album in the history of the band where all of the members have remained the same. And in this album, despite, you know, it being a kind of moving away from the colour wheel, there are direct references to previous records, you know, lyrics, imagery, all that sort of stuff. The theme of this album is very much longevity, the eternal, and, you know, kind of something that's immovable. And personally, some of my interpretations of the themes were, you know, that Stone deals with the idea of loss. It deals with the idea of, you know, the sort of the karmic wheel, I guess, you know, so like the beginning of life and then the end of life as well. I also thought it might reference a sort of headstone, because there's references to pyres, ashes, you know, all that sort of stuff, and other funerary things. But if you think about it, you know, you've got last word, maybe those are the last words that you say to a loved one. Beneath the rose, you often put a rose on top of a coffin. And then in choir, it sounds like there's a bit where he says, "They haven't got me yet." And it sounds like he's referencing death. And then we go into this sort of very ethereal sound on the dirge, which almost sounds like a kind of new beginning. And then we go into Bloom, which for me represents that sort of new life, you know, at the end of the record. Immediately though, the first thing I noticed was just how heavy Stone is. No pun intended. Beneath the Rose as well kind of immediately sent me back to that first time I heard the Red Album. And, you know, it has that sort of like kind of thrash quality, and that's pretty much kind of all over this album. But there's also a different kind of heavy, I think, this time round. You know, there's hints of like ISIS post-metal kind of thing on Under the Wheel, but Anodyne is also a lot more riffy, you know, kind of really in your face as well. And after the onslaught of, you know, 6 tracks, we get this sort of almost Steven Wilson-esque shine, which I really, really liked as well. But it's Magnolia's introduction that I really love. You know, it brings that sense of reality, but also inner peace as well. You can hear birds that are sort of chirping that I would imagine were probably filmed like near the studio or something like that, or like on a field recorder. And it, you know, kind of centers you a little bit and centers the record, I think, you know, for something that's quite ethereal and floating around. One of the most refreshing things, though, for me was that John Baisley's voice is different. It's like a totally different approach from what it has been previously. There are moments like Choir, which is honestly one of my favourite tracks on this album, where he sounds like, you know, Jigsaw from from Saw. It's really cool. The vocal manipulation is really, really awesome.
Between the shadows of your homemade oubliette, I know they're out there.
And it reminded me a little bit of Tom Waits as well. But then Beneath the Rose, for example, is another one that I really, really love, because it has this almost like spoken word aspect to it, and you know that bit where it's like knocking, it just sounds really, really like emphatic, and, you know, like you can hear those emotions kind of coming through. And then it's underpinned by this chorus, which is almost kind of a bit grungy, which I thought was cool. Reminded me a little bit of Nirvana, that sort of world. But I think that Gina Gleason, you know, adds even more vocally on this album than she did previously on Golden Grey. And they have this beautiful duet going on with the two of them. And her voice, I think, adds a real softness that kind of counteracts the quite raspy, hard-sounding John Baisley, you know, vocal performance. But then, as I mentioned, you know, the dirge is kind of like almost like a demonic barbershop quartet of vocals, which I thought was really, really cool.
Blossom is bare, brittle, and all that time has come.
But again, you know, going back to that song Choir, his choice of lyrics and the delivery almost makes it sound onomatopoeic, you know, like you can see it and you can visualize it. And that's why I think I likened it so much to spoken word, because it really is like, you know, something in the mind's eye that you can see. And I think it's also important to understand Baroness's sense of DIY as well. They've always been a very DIY band, but now this album was completely self-produced by the band. I mention this though because I thought in Golden Grey, the production almost becomes like another part of the band and something that they can completely play with. So to have them almost have completely free reign of this is very interesting and adds even more to that sort of like sonic palette of theirs. You know, these songs were all written in isolation during COVID, but they were played so much together that you can hear that sort of collective, you know, the sort of four collective souls trying to kind of put these songs together. And you see how things maybe didn't work out, you know, or like an imperfection here. But as much as the band did produce this completely themselves, they had mixing done by Joe Barresi, and it was mastered by Bob Ludwig. So it sounds so great. And I think they've got this almost fly on the wall feeling to it, as though you're almost in the room with them when they've been working this all out. And with that, I think comes a lot of improvisational kind of quality to it. It's very free flowing and kind of moves around a lot. And also the tracks kind of like really effortlessly just kind of like bleed into one another. But again, you know, tone is so important, I think, in Baroness. And on Last Word, that amazing, amazing screaming solo where it's... But then you've also got the warmth of harmonies, like, you know, seen on Anodyne, with those more Thin Lizzy sort of moments that are classic Baroness. And there's, you know, guitar-wise, there's that crunchy triplet kind of feel, but also bass can be, you know, kind of chunky and fat, but it can also just kind of hold down the groove. And as I mentioned, you know, about the production, I think production is important because it kind of illustrates this sort of weird confusion at times, you know, with like squishing drums and making things sound really quite odd. But I think with this album, it's also very direct and it can represent an aggression, you know, like the snare really hits you hard. And because of the level of talent here, you know, I mentioned about an improvisational quality, like it does sound like the band jamming out. And, you know, in Choir, it almost looks like, you know, they're kind of like looking at each other for cues. And to see, you know, like when they're going to go there. And it keeps that sort of like crackle. And I don't know, there's just something about improvising with other people where you just kind of like, okay, all right, we're going to go here. It's almost as though they created the Red Album, but with all of the experience that they've had right up until Golden Grey. And personally, this album is full of those ingredients that for me make Baroness one of the most exciting bands out there. It embraces just as much aggression as it does peace. And if you were kind of yearning for that sort of Baroness of yesteryear, then I reckon you will be really, really, really happy with Stone. You'll find nothing like this out there this year, and it is an absolute surefire album of the year contender. And for that reason, I'm going to give this album a 9.5 out of 10. So thank you ever so much for watching this album review. I hope you guys enjoyed my thoughts, and let me know what you think of Stone by Baroness, which is out today. It'd be great if you could hit that like and subscribe button. I really appreciate it. Hate having to say it. And I will see you guys very, very soon for some more album reviews and interviews. Bye.